Welcome back to the Launch Angle Podcast, Episode 8, hosted by Drew Jarmas and James Lesh. In this episode, we rank different social medias based upon ROI in terms of educational content and overall value. Then we talk about breakfast and a long conversation regarding routines versus preferences, and really how to build new habits and routines without getting stressed out over them. So without further ado, let's get to the show.
All right, we're back, episode 8, and we have a new audio setup for this one.
Yeah, so all transparency, we completely forgot to do a number of things this week. So we have two mics, which we're not using because I forgot the dongle that has two USBs to connect to the laptop. I also forgot the boom arm to hold the mic, and then I think James might have failed to buy another arm. So we are using a laundry rack right now to hold the mic, pretty low-tech setup. Big hopes of making it a pretty high-tech setup week. We got a little bit of feedback from some of the listeners, and they said basically just when the audio is in the car, you can kind of hear more of the depth, and it'll be kind of quieter and a lot louder compared to on the phone. It's a little bit more consistent and listenable audio. So
yeah, I mean, anytime I've listened to it back on the laptop, it's always sounded pretty good. But I think we've talked about once we do this remotely, it'll actually probably get better, which we'll end up doing fairly soon enough, because we can then both just have our own setups that we can account for, instead of this is actually a little harder to get right.
Yeah, don't have to be lugging things over to James's apartment where we're doing it here.
Exactly.
And all of that. But yeah, if you guys ever have any feedback, just feel free to send it over. We definitely appreciate it because, we'll listen back to the episodes, once, but sometimes there will be some inconsistencies with the audio and things like that. And also, if you guys have topics that you like in particular or any questions that you want covered on the podcast, we're always open to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think today we want to start off by talking a little bit about social media. I ran through my Twitter looking for a couple topics that I want to talk about today, and actually kind of got me thinking about just changes going on Twitter. Have you noticed any changes in your Twitter experience so far?
I haven't really noticed any system changes. I mean, obviously, there was the verification that was going on, that was turned on, then kind of turned off. I did notice a few impersonators with the verification, which, I mean, is a little bit scary.
What do you mean impersonators?
So there were two different verification labels, I believe. And then I think Eli Lilly, which is like a pharmaceuticals company, they were impersonated, and they basically said that insulin will be free now. And then I believe that they lost some market share because of it.
Oh, I did hear about this.
So, I mean, that's obviously not a good look.
Yeah.
I think they're making some changes pretty quickly, and, you got to probably pump the brakes on some of them a little bit. I know you want to kind of move fast, but, Twitter is like an existing pretty big company. Like, you can't go completely with the move fast and break things mentality.
Yeah, I don't really have many opinions on what's going on at Twitter. I was just thinking about it actually more in the sense of ROI for your time spent on social media. I still think Twitter is probably the most dense with valuable information, depending on who you follow and what your feed looks like. I've always found a lot of great articles, but I think, like Elon Musk has said this week, the news happens first on Twitter, and I think that is true. Obviously, there's speed of coverage. You can lose quality of the coverage with that, so it might not always be the most accurate, but I think it still is a valuable place for information. And for me, I think about it, if I'm going to spend time on social media, it's probably the highest ROI, because I'll usually find something pretty interesting, something maybe more long form, like a podcast or a newsletter or a book or something. So that's pretty good. Threads can be, pretty. I actually found a few like really helpful ones for stuff I've been trying to figure out recently. So that's been good. It kind of got me thinking about other social media platforms though, and where I'd rank them on ROI for time spent, and it kind of falls off a cliff after Twitter. I should probably define what I think of social media. It's probably Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok.
Hmm.
That's not a ranking. That's just what I think of as
Yeah,
social media.
and maybe like a Discord or
No,
Reddit. You don't consider that social media?
no, I don't
Okay.
think so.
So like the traditional
Yeah,
5 at this point.
yeah. But yeah, if I had to rank them, and you can rank them too, it's probably think Twitter, and then Instagram after that. There's still some good stuff you can find on Instagram. I
Yeah.
like finding like food things,
So
recipes.
top 3. What would be your third after that?
I wouldn't have it there. There's nothing else I really spend on social media after that. I will say Snapchat, just as like its core functionality of communicating with people, I really enjoy still.
Mm-hmm.
I think it still does a very good job of that. It's probably how I keep up with conversations with some friends more than any other medium. Like I have friends who I don't text at all who we only Snapchat and talk quite often through there. So I think it's still good for that. However, where I do think Snapchat has really fallen off the map or lost the plot is the Discover page.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about Discover pages for, I don't know, Instagram, I can always like find something useful there. Find like, again, I use it mostly for food and finding like recipes and stuff. Can find pretty good stuff there. Twitter doesn't have much discovery, I guess.
I guess it's a trending page, really.
Yeah, or the stuff they put on your timeline, which is usually stuff that other people you follow have engaged with, which I
Right.
usually find pretty valuable. I'll find new people from there. But the Snapchat Discover page has just become home for ads and just I think very vice based content. There's a lot of gambling ads. It's a lot of very clickbaity card titles. It's kind of all I'll say about that. But I just the Snapchat Discover page kind of infuriates me. There's nothing on there that I think is worth spending time on, and it's unfortunate you can't really do anything about it. You can't get it to go away because it's what you see if you go to look at people's stories and things like that.
Yeah, I think I would actually go, in terms of my rankings, I would probably go Instagram, Twitter, and then I would just throw in Facebook as the third, just because it's, you can go on there, see some people that you don't really see on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm not really on TikTok, and yeah, Snapchat has become pretty unusable for me, and I don't think that our cohort is really on there as much anymore. Um, I remember getting Snapchat in ninth grade, so we've been on there for a pretty long time, and I think in terms of our cohort, it's kind of lost its magic. So I do like the actual product of the communication. I feel like it's a little bit less pressure, in terms of responding.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't really love Twitter. I feel like there is valuable content on there, but I always feel like I'm trying to like weed through a bunch of like replies that are just off base and just like trying to instigate. Any popular post at this point usually just has like garbage in the comments section, so that makes it a little bit tough for me to use. So
Yeah. I've actually been trying to use Facebook a little bit more actually to look at Facebook groups that I'm interested in because you can find a lot of it's basically a forum at that point, less so than it is social media. I spun up like a Facebook account just to kind of explore that. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to touch on that
Yeah.
quickly. It's something I think about.
I would say if you expanded the definition a little bit of social media and you included like Quora, Reddit, YouTube, I think those three would probably occupy my top 3. I'd probably go YouTube, Reddit, Quora.
Yeah,
Because in
YouTube.
some ways you could say that is a social media.
You could. Yeah, YouTube is funny because I don't. Yeah, YouTube. I don't know. I think YouTube is extremely valuable
Yeah,
as
definitely.
like time spent on there. Obviously, you can watch a lot of just I don't not garbage, but just like pure entertainment, I mean, I've fallen into the rabbit hole recently of I watch Good Mythical Morning, and I just watch them eat junk food
All-time
for
classic.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'll just rip through 4 or 5 of those in a row.
Yeah, those guys have been going
It's
strong.
like my guilty pleasure.
Yeah, they've been going strong for a while. I think they were around when I was in middle school.
But no, you can learn so much on YouTube. YouTube has almost become like a course platform in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Very education heavy platform. If you know where to look, which it's not that hard to find.
Definitely.
So.
But yeah, so I threw up a quick story on Instagram, just a quick Ask Me Anything, and we got one question so far just on breakfast. Abdel asked what he should have for breakfast today. So I think it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and James had some thoughts, so
I do have some thoughts.
I'm gonna hand it over to James first, actually.
Yeah, because I think I've adopted a breakfast over the last maybe 8 months that I've actually had a hard time eating in Philadelphia because I can't find it, which is really annoying. But if I could find it, I would be having it every day still, which is cottage cheese for my breakfast.
Interesting.
Cottage cheese is, I get Good Culture cottage cheese. We're not sponsored by them, but would love to be. That would be great. I think their cottage cheese is the best in the game, in the cottage cheese game. But no, cottage cheese as just a food, like, I think it's probably got 1 or 2 grams of sugar in the form of lactose. So it's very low carb. It's very high in protein too. For like a serving of Good Culture cottage cheese, I think it's like 17 grams of protein. And you can buy it in like a whole fat version also. So I'll do that, and then I'll throw some berries in there, like raspberries or blackberries, which are pretty low in terms of their glycemic impact, because raspberries, I found out, are actually the fruit that are the highest in fiber. I don't know if you knew that.
Really?
Yeah, loaded with fiber, but also low carbohydrate.
Highest in what way? Per volume?
Oh, I don't know. This is something I heard.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Gotcha.
Blackberries, raspberries. I'll throw some chia seeds in there. Also great source of fiber and protein too. It's like with enough chia seeds, you get like 10 grams of protein. So got that in there. Walnuts I'll throw in there, which is always good. And then cinnamon. And that's been my go-to breakfast. And it is fantastic. I can't do without it.
So for you, why cottage cheese over Greek yogurt? Because for me, I would naturally go for Greek yogurt more so.
Yeah, I like Greek yogurt. I'll have that too. I just think, I don't know, I like the taste of cottage cheese more.
Really? Okay.
For some reason. Some people don't like the texture.
Yeah, I can't do the texture.
Yeah, I think the texture is good. Also, maybe it just depends. I've had cottage cheese from other brands, and I didn't really like it as much.
Gotcha.
Maybe it's just Good Culture. It's really good. But no, I'll do Greek yogurt. Greek yogurt's definitely, you get a much higher carb content on that. You get like 10 grams of sugar, again, in the form of lactose, and you have to weigh other things like how that actually impacts you, because if you're eating whole fat Greek yogurt, you know, that there's a lot of protein, a lot of fat. There. So it's not like you're just it's not what you would think of, just like, oh, I'm having 10 grams of sugar. It's kind of a much lighter load on your body, actually.
Right. Yeah, and I would say, Abdel, if you want a copy paste breakfast to go for this morning, or Monday morning when the podcast is released, there you go. But I would say, in terms of just general principles for breakfast, it really depends on what your goals are, right? If you're going to be, if you're an exercising individual and you plan to exercise that day, you're probably going to want to have something that has a little bit of protein and then also some complex carbohydrates. So during activity that's moderate to high intensity, we're burning a lot of carbs. So obviously you want to have some complex carbohydrates to go along with it. And then as long as you're 2 to 3 hours away from exercise, you're going to want to have a little bit of protein just to continue to help that protein synthesis. So what that would look like is something like, you could have 3 eggs and then maybe a cup of oatmeal with some fruit in there as well. that would be a great option. Then if you're somebody that's not exercising, you might not need as much carbs, but I think it's still important to get some carbs throughout the day, as long as you're not on like a low carb diet and you're following that. So that's really just going to help you with the activities that you're doing throughout the day, help to support your brain power, and then also provide a little bit of fiber with those complex carbs.
Yeah.
But, also, if you're doing like early morning training, this is something I want to cover as well. A lot of people want to go and just do fasted exercise, but they've really just found that it's better to just have a little bit of carbohydrates before exercise. It helps to just stave off fatigue a little bit more. There's actually, interestingly enough, there are receptors in your mouth, and we're kind of getting in the weeds here, but there are receptors in your mouth that actually detect carbohydrate, and they actually upregulate dopamine production, so it actually improves your exercise performance.
Really?
And also your motivation and your perceived exertion. So you actually perceive exercise to be a little bit easier.
Huh. I had no idea.
Yep. So even using like a mouth spray with just glucose in it has been shown to increase performance, although it's negligible carbs.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I wonder how big of a performance jump, though. I recently found out, too, that, caffeine obviously is one of the things that does not increase your performance before a workout reliably, but isn't it only by like 1%?
So that's the thing, and a lot of times the doses for caffeine are just extreme. Don't quote me on this, but I believe some of the recommendations from the earlier studies were like 4 to 7 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So
Jeez.
I'm about 205 pounds. Let's just call it I'm 100 kilograms. I would need 400 to 700 milligrams.
Yeah, that's not.
And I think it might even be higher than that.
Yeah.
So that's like, to see a performance benefit, it was at least like 2 Starbucks Grande coffees.
Yeah, I don't know how worth it that is.
Yeah, and then also I think part of it is if you consistently drink caffeine, then you're not going to see as many performance benefits versus somebody that doesn't drink caffeine and all of a sudden you're taking it.
Yeah, Michael Pollan, the author, has a quote which is, "Caffeine helps us cope with the world that caffeine helped create."
Yeah, right.
Which is true for all. Yeah, because what people don't realize with caffeine is, unless you're cycling on and off caffeine, like doing 2 days on, 1 day off, or 3 days on, 2 days off, stuff like this, where you're giving your body a chance to reset its sensitivity to caffeine. Then you just, and this is me speaking, like I have 3 cups of coffee every single day and have for years now. I think you perceive it, that morning coffee, as getting you to the next level when it's actually just getting you back to baseline most of the time, which I don't know. Caffeine affects everybody differently, so use it at your discretion. This obviously isn't medical advice, but I've always been somebody who can tolerate caffeine, no like caffeine jitters or anything like that. So I haven't really found caffeine to be a detriment to my. Who knows? Maybe I could try to go off it for a little while and see what happens, but I don't know. I don't think I have the willpower to do that either.
I mean, so my understanding of it is that for any of these stimulants, there's no real like free lunch.
No.
At the beginning, you might see boosts when you start to, use caffeine or even something like nicotine. But eventually you just hit an equilibrium, right? Because that energy needs to come from somewhere. It's not like we kind of have this perception based upon some of like the pop science films, like almost like Limitless, like, oh, you only access this percent of your brain or your energy. Completely a myth. So people think like, oh, if I could just tap into those reserves of energy using X, Y, and Z, then I could, increase my performance.
Yeah, I mean, we full disclaimer, took Alpha Brain before this, which is the On It supplement. It has a whole bunch of different little, I don't even know what's an Alpha GPC is one, other things. But I think we've noticed it's maybe helped us marginally so far today. But
could be placebo.
But yeah, I like keeping that in mind, that there's no free lunches with any of this stuff. And there's also, I like the saying, it's similar things, no free lunches. There's no solutions, only trade-offs, which is totally true. You're never getting something 100% for free in a sense. Like there's no performance boost that will come at 100% for free. With caffeine at the cost of potentially sleep later on, or who knows, some brain supplement at the cost of you might crash
later in the day. Yeah. Alcohol jeopardizing the next day in terms of, you might feel a little bit more socially loose, but the next day you're going to be potentially hungover.
I think that's a key takeaway for people for pretty much anything is that idea of there only really ever being trade-offs. There's no free lunches, and I think that's a really powerful thing to keep in mind. Kind of in the same vein, I wanted to talk a little bit about routine, and this was a helpful reframing of routine that I learned about pretty recently from the person I heard say it was this guy Alex Hormozy, who you've probably seen. He's like all over social media, entrepreneur guy, makes all these videos about business. One of his videos came across my YouTube, and I ended up watching it. And he talks about how he doesn't have a routine really. It was kind of not railing against, but in reference to, there's so many videos and books out there about, do this routine for this, or, have this morning routine. Somebody talking about their morning routine on social media gets a lot of attention because I think implicitly it promises some sort of desired end state. You say like, oh, if I could just wake up at this time every day and meditate for 10 minutes and then journal and then go for a walk, my life would get X percentage better, when it's like, it's not. Maybe it's marginally true, who knows. I'm sure it is true that having that kind of routine can lead to benefits, but what he was more so saying is the idea of a routine is actually pretty fragile. So it's like you can try to stick to a morning routine, but the problem with routines, or any routine for that matter, is we can feel bad about ourselves if we stray from the routine, and then you get mad at yourself, and then it's hard to keep up the habit. What he frames it as, he doesn't have routines, he just has preferences. So instead of a routine where I go to bed at 10 p.m. every night and wake up at 6 a.m. every day and then meditate and journal and do XYZ after that to start my day, and that's the only way I can start my day, that's my routine, and if I stray from that, then something's wrong, or I've failed for the day. Instead, you just have preferences. So like, you'd prefer to go to bed at 10, you'd prefer to wake up at 6, you'd prefer to meditate in the morning, prefer to journal, all these things. And like, what framing it as a preference does is, if those things get thrown off, like you can't fall asleep, or you get stuck in traffic and you can't, or you overshoot the alarm, it's like, okay, that's just one variable that you were trying to control that got skewed for the day, but it doesn't have to ruin the day.
Right.
Like, I think that's the nice thing about framing it as like a preference. It's because we think about all other preferences. We don't preference, like the word itself, you think about being kind of like deferential in the case that it doesn't go your way anyway. You would prefer it to be one way, but if it goes the other way, so be it. So I think that's really helpful to think about.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of times we take on these things as a part of a morning routine. Like, for example, I, like to meditate, journal, and read during the morning, right? And at the beginning, when I started doing all those things, I noticed a benefit right after meditating. I noticed a benefit right after journaling or reading. But then eventually, it becomes less about the benefits from the actual activities and becomes more almost a feeling of control. So when you, for whatever reason, aren't able to do your morning routine, it's like, wow, this day is really not in order, right? And then you lose that feeling of control. So I think at the end of the day, too, it really isn't even about the benefits of a lot of these activities for a lot of people. It just becomes, all right, this is something in the morning that's familiar, and I do it every day, and I'm able to make sure it happens, right? And if everything goes wrong in the day, at least I know that I did my morning routine. So it really becomes less about the actual benefits from the activities.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that with some things. But that being said, it's like then how do you build a routine? You know,
What do you mean?
like if a routine is just a thing to get control over something, I don't know how, like, there's got to be a way to build a routine where from each activity you're getting like value out of the routine and not thinking about it as just a thing to, another thing to check off your list.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
really know how you balance it like that.
I think it's
That,
not an absolute.
yeah.
So I think that a lot of people feel like that. They feel more in control, and then they feel out of control when they don't do the routine. But at the end of the day, you need to remember, like you're saying, it is a preference because you started this thing because you thought it'd be good for you. So if you're gonna let it affect you on the days that you don't do it, like you're just freaking out and more stressed, it's like it's not helping you in the end, right? So I think just realizing like this is additive. This is something that's a preference that you're able to do some days, but you're never signing up to do it every single day for the rest of your life. You're
Right.
meditating in order to not be so stressed.
Right.
So if
Yeah.
if the stress reduction of meditating is trying to help you like deal with the stress of the days that you can't do it, then
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense actually. Now that so an example where I've come out on the other side of this is with sleep. So I never had a problem sleeping, and then in college, my like, junior and senior year, had a real problem. Like I wouldn't call it necessarily insomnia because it wasn't like I was totally not sleeping at all, but I'd have bouts of like a week there, a week here, where I would only maybe get like 2 or 3 hours a night, and it was purely just from overthinking, having too much on my mind, too much going on, things like this. Also, junior, senior year in college, that's like a transitionary period in your life. You're getting ready to kind of move on to, the next step. It's natural to have a lot on your mind. And I was so obsessed with getting good sleep and what it would mean if I didn't get good sleep, what it would mean for my grades and taking a test the next day. I would like work myself up so much about how important getting sleep was for my test the next day that I wouldn't sleep at all. And that would just stress me out further and further and further. And it happened enough where I don't know. I guess I got to a point where I just had to relinquish control over it, and I subconsciously made this switch to like from I need 8 hours of sleep every night, or else the day is ruined. To I would prefer, but if it doesn't I would prefer 8 hours, but if it doesn't happen, I'm going to live. It's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And since then, I really haven't had a sleepless night. Like, or if I do, it just doesn't really stress me out if I can't fall asleep because it's just like, okay, I've dealt with this before. I've lived. It's fine. Like I will totally be okay. I had the same thing with food, and I think we've both kind of had this to a degree also. Whereas like I would go out if I was away from my home meals or like what I had in my fridge, which is the food I prefer. It's all like very healthy food. Or would have to kind of be on the go or with friends, and we choose to eat at some restaurant where they don't have the things that I like or prefer to eat. That used to be a big point of stress for me, and not being able to or having to eat like a fried food or something unhealthy that I didn't want to eat that day, and that would cause me a lot of stress and lack of enjoyment. And now I've just gotten to the point where it's like I know one meal is not going to affect my life in such a dramatic way as I'm making it out to be. It'll be okay. I'll get back on the horse tomorrow, and things will be okay.
And is that more? Did you feel like that because of how you'd kind of react to the food? Like you'd feel like, oh, I ate something fried, so I feel a little bit off.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think there's the physical component where I, like, just because of my diet, yeah, if I eat certain foods, I will feel off. But it was making it out to be so much more.
Yeah. So
it was never actually as impactful to me physically for that acute period of time than in my head I made it out to be.
Right, and probably because you're sitting there eating it too, thinking, oh, I'm eating this fried chicken sandwich, and I know later I'm going to feel this way. And then, like,
right.
You're prefacing it and then you start to feel a little bit of that feeling, and it's like, oh, here we go again. I'm feeling terrible from eating this food. Versus, I think there's something to be said about, we all know people that, we talk about, oh, I feel so much better eating this diet. And they're like, oh, I don't really feel different if I have like a candy bar or, a kale salad. They just don't really feel that. And that actually is a skill as well. Just like we have proprioception. So that's understanding our position in the environment and understanding things going on in the environment. We also have interoception, which is a buildable skill, which is knowing how our body feels. And there's a lot of links there and jumping off points if anyone's interested with trauma, where that link is actually cut off. But a lot of meditation as well is kind of doing body scans to help build that interoception and understand our body's reactions to stress so that we can kind of see different triggers and patterns. But yeah, I think people that are really into health and notice those things and how their body reacts to things are building more and more interoception, but I think it can be too much at times. And there's definitely something to just be kind of blind to it, like, all right, whatever. Yeah. Whatever happens, happens.
Well, there was also like the routine thinking nested in there too, because it would be, I have no other choice but to eat, this, like, I don't know, prepackaged sandwich from like a gas station, or just making something up. And it's like, oh, but part of my routine was I was going to work out later, and now I'm not going to feel good for the workout. Now the workout's ruined. Like, you're just projecting so far into the future. I'm like, the workout's ruined. This is ruined. I got to make up for it with this now. When it's just not true, largely. And the other thing I was going to say, too, also, it is affected by like how much you know about certain things. Like, definitely. Knowing how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Right.
Like, literally with food sometimes, like if you know what goes into making some foods, it can cause a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, I would just say real quick on like the gas station example affecting the workout. This is something that I think a lot of people fall into this trap. It's like, well, I ate this bad thing for lunch, because I made this ideal diet for myself, and it's going to affect this exercise program I'm doing. It's like, in both cases, it's like, you're starting from a place where you're doing both those things to benefit yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's like an unequal weighting. It's like your body doesn't care that much that you had that sausage sandwich from a gas station. And now you're going to let it affect you working out for the day, which is really good for you, no matter whether you have, a terrible meal before or a great meal before. Like,
yeah. And we've talked about this too recently, which is just like trying to tap into the fact that just as humans, we're much more robust and resilient than I think both of us probably for our own selves like to think we are.
Right.
This goes back to what I was saying again with like the sleep thing. I thought my day was just irrevocably just ruined if I didn't get 8 hours of sleep, which is just not true. Like, I was able to, I'm lit, like I'm fine. Everything's fine. I was able to make it through life, having those periods of not sleeping well. And I don't know, I think when you're forced to go through just being uncomfortable that's why forcing yourself to be uncomfortable is really good for you. I know, like, Ryan Holiday, the Stoicism guy, for anybody who knows him, writes a lot of books about Stoicism. He was talking about something where, I don't know if it was Marcus Aurelius or one of the Stoics had I almost said routine, had a practice where I think for maybe a week out of the year or a month, some time period out of the year, and this person was, for the time, in hundreds, thousands of years ago, whenever this was, they were rich and kind of like royalty. They would, I don't know how long it was, but they would pick a time and just kind of go live like off in the woods with nothing, just to remind themselves like that they could do it if it ever came to that. And you see this with modern day minimalism, stuff like that too. Just consciously forcing yourself to do without so many of these things we think we've come to need in order to live our best life. to remind ourselves that so much of it is unnecessary.
Yeah, and I think for people that are in kind of this growth and productivity realm, actually going on vacation, while it's abundant in some ways, right? You have a lot of access to food and things like that. Um, it's almost one of those types of retreats of minimalism in a way where you're not actually able to do all those morning routines that you typically do. Maybe you don't have as much access to, um, the things that you use for work that you have to get done in a given day. So I think sometimes going on vacation can be kind of a stress point for people that are really high achieving, even if there's not necessarily something that has to get done.
Yeah, I agree. Vacation is definitely a pattern breaker. I went to Austin, Texas, and then Jacksonville back in the spring, and that was the first time I traveled since COVID started. And that's when I realized too just how much of how good. Yeah, because you're out of your comfort zone when you're traveling.
Right, exactly.
And I remember being on the plane on my way back to New York after being away for like 12 days, and I think we had like a 45-minute just delay on the tarmac and couldn't get off, and I was just so tired and so hungry, and it was so late at night. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was just like, I think maybe I was just deliriously tired, but I just kind of had a moment where I accepted it. I was like, this is what it is at this
Right.
point, and there's no, because me from a couple of years ago would have gotten very worked up and frustrated about that. Might not have shown it on the outside, but internally I would have just been boiling, uh, you know, fighting to get out of that situation or make the best of, thinking, well, now I won't get home until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then the sleep is ruined, and then this or that. So I've gotten much better at just saying, whatever, this is what it is. We're gonna roll into the next day, and that thinking like that and having this preferences over routines mentality also makes everything you do very anti-fragile. Which, if you're not, for those listening, if you're not familiar with the term, it's a term coined by Nassim Taleb, who's an author and a whole bunch of different things. He's worn a bunch of different hats in his life, but he's got this book called Anti-Fragile, where he just talks about the difference between systems that are fragile, so they break upon any kind of outside impact to them. So just take a real world example, like a glass mug. If you drop it on the floor, a glass mug is fragile. If there's some outside force it can't handle, it breaks, and it is irreparable. It's irreparably damaged after that. So that's fragile. Then you have, what is after that? There's kind of a middle state that I can't remember, kind of like a neutral ground where it's like, but anyway, so things that are fragile, they get damaged by negative forces, but things that are anti-fragile actually benefit from the imposition of those outside forces. So I'm trying to think of an example. Your immune system would be an example. So like your immune system is anti-fragile. You get sick, that's bad for a time. It's a shock to the system. But after that, you've developed antibodies for whatever infected you, and you're actually more robust afterwards.
I would say a lot of tissues in the human body are, to a degree, anti-fragile. Musculature,
Yeah,
you're
right.
applying force to it, and it adapts. Bone mineral density is improved by, resistance training because you have load on your spine or on your legs, whatever. So it's improving it. I mean, obviously you can't have a ton on you to start.
Right.
So it's a specific amount of force, and yeah.
Yeah, so I think taking that approach definitely can make you anti-fragile in everything that you do, because you're not you can just kind of roll with the punches better. I also like something I saw on Twitter. It was like some video of some guy just doing a bunch of pull-ups in a row, and the caption was like it was some oversimplified thing of like, working out is easy. Like if you just or getting in great shape is easy. Like if you just tell your body to do hard shit, like you're gonna be able to do hard shit. And it's like, well, that is a gross oversimplification. It is true, like, and you can, again, to what we're talking about with, your routine being messed up. If you just tell yourself like, this isn't gonna ruin my day, we're just gonna go with whatever it is, you'll just go with whatever is happening. It becomes easier. So
Yeah, and the other thing that I would say too, and I talk about this a lot with some of my exercise and nutrition clients, is having a great lasting habit of exercising and eating well is not about stringing as many days as possible in a row of that diet or training plan together. It's not, oh, James is a really healthy person because for the last 365 days, he hasn't gone a day without a workout or without eating a fried food. It's not about that. What differentiates somebody that can't get in the habit of working out and somebody that's like a lifelong exerciser, in my opinion, is the ability to get back on the horse. It's building that muscle of, all right, I broke my streak. I had that, bad day on Saturday and it's a Sunday and I'm just getting right back on the horse. If you can build that muscle, then I think that you can build programs and habits that last a lifetime. It's a really like big paradigm shift where you're just thinking, okay, actually, I completely screwed up on Saturday. So this is where the growth is going to happen on Sunday by getting back to it instead of being like, well, everything's screwed. I broke the streak.
right.
The muscle is getting back on the horse, and that's what you're actually building.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It's you. I actually thought about this too for myself recently, which is I was thinking about how lucky I am, really, and I think you could probably say the same for yourself. And this is part just to do with just kind of our circumstances in life and upbringing and a whole host of other things that we couldn't really control, but also things that we could control, like our education and the things that we have pursued. But just having a pretty good knowledge and understanding of how to work out, how to eat healthy, um, how you know massive industries are built on helping people to make these changes in our lives, and we've both been lucky enough to. They're just habits that we've uh, easily had and have compounded on for over a decade at this point, probably for both of us. I think I started working out when I was probably like 12 or 13
Yeah,
for the
too,
football
me.
team. So, um, as like a proof of concept for anybody listening, it's like you can probably find the examples of this kind of thing in your life where it's like it may not be working out or eating healthy, it might be, but it could be, art or something. Maybe you don't realize it, but you've been sketching for, I don't know, a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll realize as you think back on it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a good artist. And the reason for that is not because I set out with this routine every day. I'm going to sit down in the morning and draw for 2 hours and take all these lessons. It's like, no, you've just figured out a way to show up more often than not,
Yeah.
which is really, I
Sometimes that's
think, the
just
key.
not conscious at all.
And
You
also
know,
the
like,
showing up part is like, I actually like that idea. Sorry to cut you off, but this idea of just showing up and putting in, doing something. Because I've realized that's another thing, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, like that I've done with my workouts, where it's like, even yesterday, I didn't even really think about it until we're talking about it now, but it's like, I didn't really know what to do at the gym. Instead, I just said, screw it, I just want to get outside. I ran 2 miles, ended up running to the gym, did a couple pull-ups, did a little bit of bench, and left. And it's just like, that's enough.
leaps and bounds better than doing nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah, way better.
yeah,
Um, and yet, the thing that I was going to say is just that I think realizing that some of us naturally, just subconsciously, or how we're wired, how we're brought up, just naturally have a bigger pull towards different things, and those things are easier to make a routine or do routinely is pretty powerful. I mean, I think that a lot of people in the health field just naturally enjoyed working out their whole life. And I think where problems happen is that they just don't understand people that can't get in the habit of working out. And they've never had that experience of being somebody that just didn't enjoy exercising. I'm, I'm simplifying and generalizing a lot. There's obviously people that got into exercising that didn't always like it and they become health coaches. But the typical archetype is the person that has always worked out and enjoyed it. So I think it's important to have empathy as somebody in the health and wellness field. If you've always loved exercising and realize there's plenty of things that you don't love doing and you've tried to get in the habit of doing that you never could make it stick. So obviously just having that empathy and then also just learning a lot about actual behavior change strategies that are, backed by science is super important as well.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think we might wrap on that. I'm not sure if we had much else to discuss today. Do you want to? I mean, I had one other thing, but I think I might save it for the next episode.
Sure. Yeah, I think we had two other things. James had one, and then I had one that I think we're going to cover.
We could touch on what we might talk about it in the next one. I was going to talk about next, and which I think I will save for the next episode because it's, I don't know if it's a lengthy topic, but there's stuff to talk about with it, which is sending cold emails to people, cold outreach, and kind of the benefit of knowing how to do that, especially in today's world, just from an experience I had recently. So I was going to talk about that.
Sure. If you want to go ahead now, or
no, I'm going to save it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and then next week I plan to talk about a little bit of program design, so how to actually design your own exercise program and what questions to really ask to help clarify your actual goals, what you should be doing, how many days per week, exercise selection, and then also progressing it between different phases, so different months that you're actually working out. So that's what you can kind of look forward to for the next podcast. We're going to cover sending cold emails and designing an exercise program.
Among
at
other
least,
things.
Yeah, at least those two things. And yeah, anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, now that we were talking about the working out thing, it did remind me from an example from, I think it's from Atomic Habits. Doesn't he talk about the guy who got into a workout routine where he started out by he didn't even work out. The starting of the habit was just I have to show up to the gym. I don't even have to work out. I just have to be at the gym.
Yeah.
I think that's a powerful example of just if you just show up.
Yeah.
Most of the time too, if you just show up for something, something will happen. You'll start doing the thing. There's that quote. Actually, I don't know if it's a quote, but it's just a saying of motivation follows action. It's not the other way around. You can't really. Very rarely can you just will yourself to do something out of thin air. It's if you just start doing the thing, that forward progress leads to a lot of positive momentum.
Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of it is, people start out as people that did not exercise at all, and then all of a sudden after working out for a week, they become perfectionists. It's if I'm not going to go to the gym and have the best workout of my life, it's not even worth it. It's a week ago, you weren't working out at all.
Yeah.
And now, you're having these expectations on it. You should have no expectations for the first 6 months of working out, let's say. Or even, you should never have expectations if you're just purely, I wouldn't even say recreational exerciser, somebody that just exercise for health. Why have expectations in general? Just get there. Just do it. Just do a little bit, even if it's 5 minutes.
Right.
And I think getting that mentality of just going for 5 minutes and doing a warm-up, you're I could do another 5. Once you're there, you don't want to waste your time. So
exactly. And I think on that note, we are going to wrap because I think we're going to go for a run soon here.
Yeah.
Which I don't think either of us want to do because it's 40 degrees outside. But
yeah, at best. But
we'll just start running anyway and see what happens.
All right, we'll see you guys next time, and thank you for listening.